colonial status
to become a Canadian province. In 1942, Port aux Basques, and for that matter all of Newfoundland, was far removed from the horror of war, 4,000 miles away in Europe. Although thousands of Newfoundlanders had been seen off to the war, the closest the folks back home had come to witnessing war were numerous torpedoing of merchant ships in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. However, on the night of October 13th, 1942, the passenger ferry Caribou pulled out of North Sydney for a routine sailing to Port aux Basques. On board were 238 passengers and crew, including 117 servicemen. It was a calm night, and the Caribou was steaming under blackout conditions, a common wartime precaution. The Canadian Navy minesweeper HMCS Grand Mare was her escort for the crossing. On the way, a peculiar incident that may have been the first indication of what would make this crossing anything but routine.
The captain had a premonition the vessel would be hit.
Unknown to everyone aboard the Caribou, a German U-boat, a submarine, was cruising beneath the Gulf waters. About 25 miles from Port aux Basques, the Caribou came to a stop while the ship's captain received instructions from the Navy on the course he would steer into port. The U-boat, which is thought to have been tailing the Caribou across the Gulf, fired a torpedo, and it found its mark.
The torpedo struck her on her starboard beam, and from accounts it passed through the vessel out to the port side. It also caused the loss of 2 lifeboats. And there is something else that's not too well known, I don't think. The passengers got to the lifeboats ahead of the crew. They got them free of the falls and then crowded into the boats. One lifeboat went bows down and just turned over. Another one landed, but no one had put the plugs in, and she was sinking as fast as the Caribou was sinking. And in the end, I think there was only one lifeboat that was able to get away. Some people made it on rafts, and others claimed that as long as they lived, they would never forget the screams of the drowning people.
The Caribou sank within 10 minutes. Mac Piercy jumped off the vessel just in time.
When I got to the lifeboat, I would say there must have been 30 people in it. They had not put the plug in it before they launched it. It was half full of water and full of people.
Of the 238 passengers and crew on board the Caribou, 137 were lost. After the Caribou went down,
there were 14 widows and 51 children who had lost their fathers as a result of the disaster.
The survivors were taken to Sydney, where at Sydney City Hospital, a mother and her 15-month-old son were treated. The baby, Leonard Shields, was the youngest survivor of the Caribou sinking. Dorothy Ross was head nurse.
Well, for the little fellow, we didn't have to use any equipment. We just kept him warm and fed him warm drinks, hot drinks. And he slept a lot. We tried to keep him awake as much as we could until, a couple of days.
The sinking of the Caribou sent shock waves from one end of Newfoundland to the other.
I think it had the same effect on Newfoundland as it had on any other group of people who've experienced a disaster of that nature. Stuff that had been sort of poo-pooed and pushed aside suddenly became a hard fact. And then people said, we have to sit down and deal with a hard fact.
After the Caribou disaster, the German U-boat threat in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and along the Atlantic coast was taken more seriously.
From then on, trips from North Sydney to Port aux Basques were daytime trips only. And the Burgio reported that even on a daytime run, she had been chased by 2 submarines, but the escorts with her had dropped depth charges and were able to force the subs away.
The Caribou disaster, though devastating to Newfoundland, was certainly not an isolated incident in the Gulf waters during World War II. From 1939 to 1942, 20 ships were sunk by enemy action in the river and Gulf of St. Lawrence. During 1942 alone, 956 ships were sunk in the North Atlantic by U-boats. Though these statistics place the sinking of the Caribou in the context of other wartime losses, they cannot detract from the grim reality of that October morning 49 years ago. The memory of the Caribou lives on today in the form of a new modern ferry, the MV Caribou, put into service a few years ago between Port aux Basques and North Sydney. John Waterman, ASN News.
Although the second